Hi there, welcome to slide 3. Um, let's dive in. As I've said, the world of theater during the Renaissance was heavily influenced by ancient Greeks and Romans, and the ideas about play format and plot structure were being considered once more after having practically disappeared during the Middle Ages. Um, by 1550, interest in dramatic theory had slowly developed, and um, dramatic scholars, people who were studying theater, were mostly being influenced by Horace's art of poetry and Aristotle's poetics. Mainly, they were being influenced by Aristotle and all of his ideas. I know in previous theater courses at BCC, you've learned a lot about Aristotle and his contributions to defining the structure of plays. Um, in 1498, Aristotle's text, Poetics, was first published in Latin. And after that, it became once again basically the Bible of what drama is. In 1549, it was then translated into Italian, which made it even more significant to those who were studying theater and studying drama in Italy at that time. And they took what they learned from Aristotle and they combined it with some of their own original ideas from their own time, which was the Renaissance, and thus was born neoclassicism, or the neoclassical ideal. So neoclassicism is, that's like a tongue twister. Neoclassicism is just a school of thought around how theater should work. And it's going to get referred to because it's sort of the big inspiration throughout the Renaissance in all the nations. So it's good to have a good understanding of it. So pay attention. And here we go. What was neoclassicism? So this school of thought follows Aristotle in the idea of reducing all regular drama into two forms, comedy and tragedy, which each had their own patterns. So what makes a tragedy a tragedy? According to neoclassicism, tragedies draw their characters from the ruling classes. They base their stories on history or mythology. It has unhappy endings, employs a lofty and poetic style. So the way, especially like the way the characters speak, would be lofty and poetic. Comedy, on the other hand, draws characters from middle or lower class, bases stories on domestic or private affairs, has happy endings, and imitates the style of everyday speech. Neoclassicism demanded purity of dramatic form, which meant that you were just not allowed to intermingle drama and tragedy and comedy. There were no tragicomedies yet. Neoclassicism followed Horace in his teachings in insisting that plays be divided into 5 acts, and in stating that the main function of plays was to teach and to please or entertain. And really, the entertainment value was there, but the main focuses of neoclassicism was that plays were there to teach us and be instructional. The idea was that comedy taught us by ridiculing behavior that should be avoided, and that tragedy could teach us by showing the horrifying results of certain mistakes and certain misdeeds. The fundamental, most important demand of neoclassicism was verisimilitude, which is the appearance of truth. And it was kind of a complex concept, so I'm going to divide it up into what the 3 goals of verisimilitude were. The first goal of verisimilitude is reality, meaning the plays needed to be believable. That was very, very important to the Italian Renaissance artists. So, how did they make sure that their plays were believable? Under neoclassicism, sort of the rules were that there couldn't be any fantasy or supernatural events unless they were integral parts of some myth or history or the Bible, in which case they would be believable to the audience, so they could be used. Soliloquies were discouraged in playwriting because they were considered an unnatural or unbelievable way for a character to speak. A confidant was allowed, however, because they thought it was believable that a character would confide in another character. So that was a believable way to figure out the innermost secrets of a character. Battles and crowd scenes and any kind of violence all happened off stage because they didn't think that they were able to depict things like that in a believable enough way on stage. Unity of time and unity of place were kind of these interesting concepts of neoclassicism and this goal of reality. The idea was that for unity of time, the idea was that because the audience was sitting in the theater for 3 hours, the idea was like, well, these audience members know that they've only been in this theater for 3 hours, so the action of the play cannot take longer than 3 hours, or it just wouldn't be believable, because the audience would be like, we've only been sitting here for 3 hours. How did they zoom ahead in time? And later, this was changed to the action of a play could take place over like a 24-hour period. But you didn't have like these big gaps, like, and then 3 years later, it just wouldn't happen. And same thing with the unity of place. They were like, well, the audience knows it's sitting in the theater this whole time, so we can't have the characters be jumping around from place to place, because that just wouldn't be believable. So there weren't multiple settings. It was just one setting. So if the play took place in a certain city, that would be it. It would never take place anywhere else. That would be it for the whole play. And later they changed it to, it could be a different place, but it would have to be a place that they could believably get to within a 24-hour period. Okay, so that's all the reality stuff of the verisimilitude goal, or just this believability goal. The second part, reality was the first. The second part is morality. Drama had to reveal life's ideal patterns. Wickedness had to be punished. Goodness had to be rewarded. That's the way it had to work in these plays. And then the third goal is universality. So sort of this universal ideal. The idea that drama had to embody truths that remained unchanged, regardless of historical period or geographical location. It just had to be these like universal truths across time and across place that were revealed in drama. So all this might seem really restrictive when we think about it now. It's like, oh my gosh, all these rules about playwriting. But it was an attempt to define the world that playwrights should seek to mirror in their works. It was really, really desirable among critics and scholars between 1570 and 1750. Neoclassicism at this time really was mostly dealt with in educated circles, but a lot of the other Renaissance theater movements ended up being really influenced by it, by this neoclassical ideal. So we need to have a strong understanding of it, because it will be referred to throughout all the